אז שוב בוקר טוב, my name is Itay Ohad. I will introduce a city construction tool, which is a system I developed in support of sustainable construction in urban environments. So my presentation is about construction sites within the urban environment. These sites have a significant ongoing impact on our life. So the first question of this research is basically how come there are so many sites in urban areas nowadays? So cities are constantly growing, as we all know, due to immigration and urbanization. These processes, they raise the land values and hence buildings are constantly demolished and replaced with new ones, which are more suitable for their changing environment. These trends raise the amount of construction sites. Now, the potential effects of these sites include traffic congestion, delays, disruption of economic activities, large amounts of construction waste, noise pollution, as well as compromised walkability, as we can see here in this picture. Out of these, the most severe impact is considered to be the damage to the urban traffic infrastructure. That is including cars, bikes, and most importantly, pedestrians. Next, I will examine the city of Tel Aviv to learn more about the scale of this issue. So as of January 2019, out of 47,000 existing buildings, there were about 9,000 requests for construction permits. I would like to repeat that number, 9,000 requests for construction permits, which are in various statuses. About 2,000 of them are currently being processed. About 1,000 were already approved. About 3,500 buildings are currently in construction. About 800 final certificates have been obtained. And finally, about 1,000 have been populated over the last 10 years. So this data suggests that overall, approximately 20% of the city is constantly undergoing the construction process. Hence, I aim to study how to improve the urban construction process so that it could actually benefit the city and reduce the negative impact on its surroundings. So we are all familiar with the nuisance caused by these sites, but how do they actually affect their immediate surroundings and how do the authorities react to this nuisance? So as a part of the requests for a permit, contractors must submit a form that outlines the workspaces required for construction. The use of the sidewalk or the roadway is generally prohibited unless a special authorization is issued, unlike we see here on this picture. Moreover, the contractors must compensate at their own expense for any damage caused by the violation of those regulations. As we can see in the pictures, those regulations are not always happening. So actually the construction method and the type of machinery chosen by the contractor greatly affect the severity of the disturbance. Nevertheless, in the current state of affairs in Israel, the contractor and the owner will usually choose the most cost-effective method without having to justify their choice to parties that are not involved in the contractual agreement. So the community or the city dwellers, us, we are never a part of this decision, although we are affected by it so much, as this decision is based mostly on minimizing costs and duration of the construction process. So how may we classify the construction site? Is it possible to distinguish between their impacts? So the most intuitive classification of the site is by its size. According to this, there are approximately 3,500 small sites, about 3,000 medium ones, and 2,500 large sites. We can zoom in here to the surroundings of Dizengoff Square. We can see the different sizes, as well as the permit life cycle, as I mentioned before. And most importantly, we can see here that in this diagram, the impact of the construction sites on the urban traffic infrastructure. Each red dot that you see represents one such disturbance to the city. So why is the impact on the traffic infrastructure considered to be the most severe? So each site requires a proper workspace. When there isn't enough space within the site boundaries, naturally public space is expropriated. There is a major burden on these sites due to the need to transport materials throughout the construction period, and this is a thing that may take even years. Moreover, aside from the material transported to the site, waste is accumulated that needs to be removed. So there are two main scales from which we may examine this issue. First, the urban scale, which entails travel delays, road traffic, and even accidents. And second is the street scale, which shows the prolonged closure of roadways and sidewalks, as well as the loss of parking space. My presentation focuses on the second of the scale, the street scale. So here we can see how these construction sites and the choice of machinery impacts the streetscape. These pictures are taken from Tel Aviv center. So it is very important, in my opinion, to note that high-rise buildings sometimes they tend to have a small urban footprint. So in those cases, they may cause a prolonged and severe disturbance. Therefore, the size of the site may not be the best way to examine this issue. Instead, I suggest to assess how adequate the available workspace for construction is. So a typical construction process for concrete buildings consists of several main stages, starting from the groundwork, continuing with the foundation work, to the structural frame, and concluding with the finishing work. Nevertheless, some stages, they take place simultaneously to allow for a more efficient work schedule. Once the construction of the structural frame begins, the lack of space in the site becomes an even greater problem. So therefore, my work focuses on the construction of the structural frame and the finishing work. The processes that are derived from these are establishing the frame, transporting the materials for the finishing works, and of course, removing waste from the site. So now we will examine the impacts more closely. So among the most common formations for transporting ready mixed concrete are the truck-mounted pumps, like we see here, usually alongside exchanging mixers. These trucks are equipped with a boom. Can everyone see my cursor? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So these booms are mounted on top of the trucks, and they're using them as long as the placing point of the concrete, as we see here, is within the reach of the boom. So why is this formation so harmful to the city? So in order to stabilize the truck, outriggers, as we see here on the down part, they must be used, and they can be overall 8 meters wide in a way that blocks the street, and by that makes the disturbance even worse. Nevertheless, there are other more friendly to the street equipment formations, such as the climbing concrete placing boom, like here, that is situated inside the construction site and works alongside truck mixer. And instead of the pump that is on the truck, there is a smaller stationary pump here. So why doesn't everybody using this technology? Because many smaller projects cannot afford to use this type of formation due to its relatively higher cost. The second major disturbance that I want to attend to is the material transportation. There are two basic methods that we can see in the city for transporting materials, both to the construction sites and within the site itself, moving it from one point to another. If there is enough room for unloading, the site storage method is the most common. Here we can see the loader crane, which is a truck equipped with a crane that unloads the materials to the site. Another form of this method is the crane, the site crane that unloads the materials. So why is this method is a problem to the contractor? The term that describes this situation is double handling, which means that materials has to be transported twice. First, from the truck to the storage area, and then from the storage area to its final point on site. In short, the crane works longer and the cost is higher. The second common method is just in time. Here, materials arrive exactly when they are needed, according to the construction schedule. This is common and convenient for the contractor since there is no need for space and usually no double handling. But why this method is so problematic for us, for the city dwellers? Because it creates a constant burden of trucks on the street. In my opinion, it is very important to note that the urban sidewalks became platforms for unloading construction materials, instead of serving us, the city dwellers, properly. Here we can see another version of the just-in-time method, where the loader crane, the truck, unloads the materials. Transportation of heavy elements may cause an even bigger disturbance. Here we can see precast items that require initial fixation in their final location, and therefore cannot be just randomly placed on site. Therefore, when just-in-time is used, they cause prolonged unloading times and worsen the disturbance even more. So to sum up the material transportation issue, the just-in-time method is better for the contractor usually, while the site storage method, the first one I showed, may serve the city dwellers best, only if there will be a proper area in construction sites for unloading. The third and the last disturbance I will attend to is the waste, construction waste. One of the principles of waste handling is on-site separation. One of the reasons for not separating is very simply the lack of space in urban environments. So here we can see an example of a separation with two containers. And here we can see only one container. So in summary, the disturbance consists of two main factors, time and space. The amount of time the sidewalk is blocked or roadway, and the amount of public space being expropriated. Actually, there is a subset of my work in an associated research course for which I have written a thesis, which is more focused on how to calculate these parameters. I will not get into the details now, perhaps later if time will allow it. Anyway, based on these conclusions, I suggest an alternative method to assess construction, not only through the lens of efficiency, but through the prism of the impact on the street. On the graph, we see equipment formations for the frame. The orange represents time and the purple represents area. I have pointed out here, number 3, the friendliest one to the street based on calculations. It is also possible to calculate the time of the disturbance in a similar way for unloading all the materials for the finishing works. Also, I will not get into the details now. Okay, so hence the research question is how to support material transportation to urban construction sites in order to reduce the traffic disturbance and improve urban pedestrian experience. So my design proposal is a city construction tool. I suggest a temporary structure that consists of two components: an elevated storage platform that we see here to the right, combined with a facility for construction workers. The unloading point is situated in between the two. By using this external system, the sidewalk can be reclaimed for pedestrians, like we see here on the ground floor. In plan, the structure is attached to the constructed building situated in between the two. As here. By using this external system, the sidewalk, as I said, can be reclaimed for pedestrians. The design goal the main design goal is bridging between different stakeholders, because this problem involves a lot of stakeholders, us, the community, the city dwellers, as well as the contractor and the workers in the construction. So my main goal is create infrastructure for street-friendly construction methods. I'm hearing a little bit of noise. Maybe someone asked something, or just someone forgot to, okay. So instead of unloading in public area in a way that is making the unloading time long, I suggest an elevated materials platform which can use to reclaim the sidewalk for pedestrians. Instead of strict supply hours that are bound to the common just-in-time method and usually take place during the street rush hours, I suggest a different method that can allow transporting materials in more flexible hours when the street is not as congested. So the technology that this suggestion will be based on is automated storage and retrieval systems, in short ASRS, which has 3 axes of movement to ensure storing as well as retrieving materials, as I will explain shortly. It is based on the fact that most of the construction materials that I attended to are transported on standard pallets. Moreover, in the current state of affairs in Israel, construction work environment tends to be neglected in most cases. Therefore, I suggest that one of the features of my suggestion will be organization of a proper work environment. So to sum up, the design goal is bridging between different stakeholders, us, the city dwellers, the contractor, and the workers. So I will present now a sample case of an ideal system tailored for a construction site of a relatively large scale. I will elaborate on each of the 2 components separately, starting with the transporting platform. So to the right here, you see the storage system, which we will investigate more closely in short. Here to the left, you see the waste storage containers that are connected to the site and are situated in the unloading point. Designated area for precast items that cannot be transported in pallets. And here we can see the site crane that has direct access to this storage facility. Here we can see a transverse section in the unloading point that exemplifies how the construction process can happen with the sidewalk open for pedestrians. We can see next the truck unload the materials to the automated system. Here we can see the possible establishment of the frame using existing more sustainable methods. Likewise, that we see the truck mixer connected to a pipeline that goes straight to the site in a way which allows pedestrians to use the sidewalk. And finally, we can see here the waste containers. Now looking in the longitudinal section, we can see how the 2 components are connected. Please note the difference between the right and the left side. Considering the constructive aspect, the right floor is based upon beams and columns due to the heavy loads to endure the vertical loads, while the rest of this suggestion is based on standard scaffolding. Here we can see the unloading point again. And now we can go deeper in the second longitudinal section. We can see the automated storage and retrieval system. Based on the abilities of this technology, it can be active independently 24-hour in order to organize the materials needed for the process of construction in according with the dynamic schedule, and that is to improve the construction process. We can see here how the crane access and loads it. Next, I would like to address the design of the workers' facility in accordance with the worker daily activities, including different work environments for different types of workers. So here we can see a sample case, which will attend to these different activities, starting from an entrance lobby and changing room on the blue color, briefing room for the team of the workers, as well as private work areas, and finally a dining hall. Here on the plans, again, we can see the entrance lobby and the changing room, briefing room for the teams, private work areas for the possible use of the managers and other workers that needs to use private working areas, and the dining hall for all the work. Here we can see how the truck can unload materials in flexible hours in such a way that the city users can keep using the sidewalk while the construction process can continue. Okay. Once again, we can see here a perspective of the street that instead of being expropriated on the expense of the community, can be reclaimed while facilitating construction processes. And here we can see how it is possible maybe to rethink of the construction environment as a proper workplace for the workers. Okay, so we have seen how this sample case can be addressed, but in fact, construction sites, they vary in size, accessibility, and their surroundings. Some sites have a relatively long street facade. Some sites are very deep. Sometimes we can see more than one street facade to construction sites. Therefore, this system must have the ability to be modular and reused in order to adapt itself to different scenarios. For instance, in the case of a site with available parking lots, like we see here on its facade, unloading materials to the transportation platform can be done externally, like we can see here. While in the case of no available parking lots, the unloading can be performed from within, like we see here. We have to keep in mind that one of the design considerations that must be taken into account with this system is that the sidewalk must be wide enough to ensure the proper passage of the city dwellers. In my opinion, future directions possible for this project should be refining the adaptability of the temporary structure to a variety of scenarios, because there are endless kinds of construction sites that needs to be addressed for this system. Secondly, an interesting direction should be examining the ability of the structure to change physically over time with respect to the construction needs. And finally, in order to convince the different stakeholders, most importantly the contractor, there must be an efficiency evaluation performed financially to check whether this thing can be cost effective. Before I finish, I would like to thank my family. I would also like to thank one person in particular. I don't know if he could made it, Professor Aviad Shapira, who accompanied me during the research of this work. So thank you for the contribution of your knowledge, your open-mindedness, and your dedication, and the ability to shed light on the vast construction world. To sum up my presentation, due to the fact that urban sites differ in size and context, this temporary structure should be addressed not as a single catch-all solution, but rather than a system that can be reused, grow larger or smaller, and change its dynamic according to its surroundings. I suggest to conceive of construction sites as an integral part of the city, rather than just through the parameters of efficiency and cost that are typically examined by engineers, contractors, and developers. So toward this end, I suggest to introduce the role of architects and designers into the construction process thus making the city a better place also during the time of construction and not only afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Itay. Normally we'd hear clapping at this point, but since most people are on mute, we can do some virtual clapping. So now we'll have commentary from our guests, but before that, I just want to make one mention that I forgot to mention in the beginning, and that is that Jan will be lecturing following this session at 2 p.m. Israel time. And there are links that most people should have already for that lecture. So would any of our guests like to begin the commentary?
Yeah, no.
Nobody wants to go first.
I can go first, David.
Sure.
So it was a very thorough presentation. I thought a very good analysis of the problem with construction sites. And the second part where you explain the system with its different components, I found very interesting. The very last point of your presentation, right before the conclusion, is of course the main thing on every contractor's tongue, which is how much does it cost? And so I'm wondering if you did some cost analysis of the system based on the size of the construction site or the size of the building. Were you able to enter into the economics of this kind of system?
Actually, you are right. It's basically the most important thing for the contractor. I started on making some calculations, but because this process involves so many parameters, so to make a real precise estimation of the cost was a little big for this
Sure.
For this kind of work, but
Yeah.
I try to make an assessment of more of the hours that the city is suffering from this.
Yeah.
Because I found out that I was not being able to make something which will be very precise.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So one thing I would say is that some of your proposals seem to be used in Paris, actually, and in other cities where they elevate the construction site so that the sidewalk stays open. Of course, there's a problem with natural light and lots of noise still, but it is a solution. One of the lower images showing the scaffolding with the access stair that looks like a street in central Paris, we could say. But one thing I would suggest in terms of the cost analysis, I'm wondering if perhaps the city, when the contractor applies for the building permit or applies for the construction site permit, if there is a contribution from the city or a reduction in cost, if they follow strictly what you propose, there could be something like that. And then also, of course, the fact that all of these temporary structures can be reused from one site to the next, so that cost efficiency goes up long term if you do 10 construction sites. I don't, it seems like a very interesting question for the, if you continue your research to dive more deeply into the cost analysis and the possibilities of getting subventions or reductions in cost, the more that the construction site installation contributes, or does it hinder city life, existing city life? So I think it's a very interesting topic that you've chosen to do. We haven't really talked much about the architecture itself, but that's also in there as well. Would be a second follow-up. The technology of having the scaffolding, what kind of scaffolding is it? And the second part for heavier construction materials, what is that made of? All of these topics are interesting. And I think the other topic would be, of course, how do we construct in the city? Is that different from constructing out in the countryside or in the suburbs where there's much more room to construct? Personally, I do a lot of construction inside small neighborhoods in Paris, and so the materials of the architecture, the materials of construction are determined by the access to the site already. So it's another topic of research, I think, that you could continue on.
Thank you.
Yeah, shall I add something?
Certainly.
I was very impressed with your presentation. It's a very good theme because it's not just, you're not just trying to make nice architecture, you're actually trying to solve a real issue, which you very well analyzed. I liked also the style, and then you made an architectural solution. I very much like the style of your presentation. It's very beautiful in terms, it's very clear, very good to understand. The graphics are really inspiring. I wish our presentations would always be that good. It's also, in terms of theme, it's very valuable for the future because all the buildings of Tel Aviv probably need a reconstruction. As you already came up with your statistics, this is probably at this moment mostly the densification, and there might be a second wave of transformations going into sustainability when Israel starts to do this. So it's very yeah, relevant also for the future. Generally, I would think that you can't do this alone, but you need the city. So this needs to be put into some kind of policy. And in that, for that issue, it would have been nice, or maybe in the future you can do that, to actually check out other cities and what kind of policies they have. Well, we already had heard about Paris, but there are also really interesting issues coming up in, there are good examples in Hong Kong, in New York, in Monaco, cities that have a very bad, where the construction has a bad impact. Also in New York, for example, they found a solution which is only aesthetical. You should see it. They have now is beautiful scaffolding instead of practical, because there's so much scaffolding that it really defines the way that the city looks. In Rotterdam, for example, we have a construction site where this would be a fantastic solution. Instead, we have to build a little bit of artificial land into the port, which raised the construction cost with 10%, and which meant that we had to redesign our building into something much more simple. So you see that this kind of solution could also have an impact on the architectural quality of the entire building. Yeah, so that's a very nice thing. Of course, the money is a big issue, so that's why I think you can only do this together with the city. If the city forces the contractors to work with something like this, but perhaps in the future, now you have selected a very expensive technology, and also a technology that is not very reliable all the time. Perhaps you could also think of a more low-tech solution, where you just have a rack and maybe rolls, and it's less computer generated, but basically a little bit more relying on muscles.
So I will follow up. My name is Yasha. I'm the dean here. Nice to meet you all. Um, First, I'd like to join both of the previous jury members in congratulation on the presentation, the graphics, and the issue itself. I mean, I think it's refreshing to have this issue in the vast presentation of architectural project. So for me, it was very exciting to listen. It was the longest 20 minutes I think I experienced. It was supposed to be 20 minutes, but I think it didn't work for you. I think you could condense this presentation to 20 minutes, and we would believe you that you did this amazing research that you presented in the first 20 minutes. Going into the project, I like your solution. I think it's very interesting. I think you touched the main points of the problem. Being one of these 20% people that live in between 3 working sites in Tel Aviv, I can tell you that this is a major issue and major impact on the quality of life of the people around Tel Aviv. But I think there are also some other issues that you didn't touch, like noise. I think noise is a major issue of this big machine that leave their engine open for during the working site. And if you would have checked in places like Singapore or other places, they have quite an interesting regulation on noise and how it should be disciplined, I would say, within the building. And we have an expert here on noise. Maybe he can add something on this. Also dust. I mean, this thing is open. If you have been in Tel Aviv, you know that dust is a major problem. We don't have a rain every couple of days that cleans everything. And this working site produce clouds of dust all around them. So I would imagine that this is an issue that you should add to your suggestion. Another comment is, I think you were a little bit too shy in your solution. You only looked at the sidewalk while there are the roads. And the roads can also be used to, if they used properly, to save part of the disturbance to the city. I would imagine that in some places you can put in a way, take the trucks up to the second level and have the flow of traffic continue. And by doing this, you will save much of the noise and burden on the street level of these giant trucks with the concrete and with the pump that takes them, I would believe, like hours to pump the contact. So I would imagine that there is also a potential to use the roads and maybe some of the adjacent building by some sort of negotiation. If you give me part of your side of the building to, for a year, I would give you something. And these are, thinking outside the box, which I'm a little bit missing in this presentation. A second comment is, going a little deeper into the technology. I think it was mentioned here. I would imagine that you could, go a little deeper into this robotic system, into the scaffolding, and see if there are also invention there. So to sum up, I think it was a refreshing project. It's very, very interesting. I think it was a brave project. Present this thing in a final project where we expect, every young architect to show his or her muscles and design. I think it's quite brave. And I really would like to, tell you that keep on this braveness. This is the braveness that wins competitions and path your way into our, in architecture. But time limit and this small thing is something that you should work on, because out there people are less, have less time and less forgiving. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I can also add a few points. Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
First, I want to join the other guests. It's very crucial project, very crucial topic, really on point, especially in Tel Aviv and in the future, I suppose I hope, in other urban development in other cities. Also the graphics and the presentation. Of course, I joined Yasha. It could be edited to be more precise. I think the process of understanding the construction process is really, really good and really professional, and the support you got from outside of the faculty is shown, of course. For me, however, there is a lack of the analysis of the urban parameters. It was, Yasha said something about the noise and the pollution. I want to add something about the safety and the feeling safety. As a mother of children, I really have to go with the children across the streets because they're afraid of the cranes. And there's, I think, a set of parameters which you can analyze this, both psychological and maybe visual, and of course others, to maybe build a sets of values that can maybe enhance or promote the technical parameters. And another thing is, for me, would be interesting to think maybe, or maybe to connect the building process to actual building industry in Israel, or each place it is implemented, to understand it in relation, because maybe it can contribute to or change or affect the design of the building, which you almost didn't touch. So for me, it could be like a generator for the thinking, which would be very interesting. But chapeau, very nice, very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Would anybody else like to add anything? Okay, well, forever now, speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say.
Yeah, one thing, maybe good to talk to contractors in the next part of this, to test it a little bit for reality.
Yeah. I would also add something that has been mentioned already, but to see how this issue is handled in other cities, such as Singapore or Hong Kong, to have some examples from other cities. And there are definitely things that can be learned and implemented in Tel Aviv and elsewhere.
I just want to make
just one last example in Paris is that they've gone overboard with covering the scaffolding with plastic protection to limit the dust somewhat, not very much, but limit it somewhat. And now there are these spectacular advertising, of course, on all of these plastic coverings all over town. Many people criticize it, of course, but it's a way of having a trade-off. There's a commercial trade-off. Someone else pays for the protection, and they get a little bit of advertising in exchange. So it's one example of an international solution.
I would, again? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Sure.
Okay, I enjoyed the presentation, of course, which was excellent. And of course, I enjoyed the fact that people are now dealing with noise problems with construction sites. I want to point out that vibrations are also a problem that has to be dealt with for various reasons, and the noise and vibration of the truck traffic as well. And so I wanted to ask whether Itay was aware that there are now some simple and sophisticated monitoring systems because of the proliferation of smartphones and so on, and that you can really follow in real time what is going on with the noise and the vibration on site or around the site before the neighbors complain and so on. And this tends to generalize now. The other point is that we are witnessing nowadays less noise in urban cities, and now people will probably require stringent criteria for noise. And so it might be a good idea on such large projects to think also about and also the other environmental problems. So I wanted to ask Itay what he thought about.
Sorry, can you say it again, the question?
Well, I want to know whether you're aware that there are noise and vibration monitoring systems now that are available quite easily because of smartphones and other simple systems. And I was wondering whether, in addition to the excellent work that you've done, whether you had time to think about this type of evolution of the construction site.
Yeah, it is a very interesting field, actually, that I did not include in my work, but I read a little bit of academic research on this, but I was not aware of whether it's being used or not.
Yeah, it is. Check, for example, what's going on in England. And you'll find some smartphone systems that can warn the construction manager if something goes wrong. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one final note. Our students, normally would be presenting in Hebrew, and everybody was concerned about their English skills, even though when they speak in English, their skills are usually awesome. And Itay in particular was concerned. I just want to say that this was an incredibly clear and organized presentation. Whether or not it went on too long or not has a little bit to do with the fact that there was a huge amount of information that was synthesized into this final presentation, and lots of things that we didn't discuss that Itay looked at over the semester. So we say in Hebrew, kol kavod. That part of it was excellent. And one final little note, which is that we're also very happy that this kind of project comes up in the studio. Final project's kind of a uncharacteristic project. At the same time, it really does represent the latest generation's kind of look at the world kind of purely and objectively to see what kinds of problems we've left ourselves with and how those problems may change and be modified when they're looked at, not just by engineers or city planners, but by architects, people who care about space and detail and materiality. So
yeah. Just a few words from my side. I've been following Itay for his serious way of thinking and work, and this very special topic that Itay took, and I really appreciate the way in the process, and also I think Itay, you can take very valuable things that were said here and by this panel and this opportunity to have this international panel of esteemed guests. I wish that the next step would be not only to minimize the problems that a building site creates, but to find a way that these building sites could even contribute to the city by energy, by giving some sort of benefit back to the city. But I think it's really I join the presentation is really Very nice. Thank you.
תודה.